Greetings, everyone. We're back for another session today in session number 15 on conspiracies. And yes, this is What Does the Bible Tell Us About Conspiracies? And Michael, I would assume that we have much more to learn. Welcome back, Michael.
Welcome back, Brett, and hello, dear listeners. We can talk several hundred hours about Kennedy as well, but I don't think that is very much the thing to do. I suppose that it's really interesting and really important to put the finger to the thing that these politicians do serve the Vatican and they don't serve the people. That's what they've actually been paid for, but they don't do it because there are so big powers in the background that if you don't obey, they won't get rid of you. They will get rid of you in one way or the other. Either destroy your social life or destroy your entire life. So welcome to session 15. What's it about? About the killing of Kennedy. I say once again, beware of documentation. What does documentation actually mean? Documentation means a teaching, a lesson, an example, an authoritative paper. See document. Document, but means a doctrine. Interesting. So the one who's making a documentary is putting on a doctrine or his doctrine on you. Now, you have to think this way. You have to look upon that fact. You have to think about that. And the conclusion must only be this. Yeah, that's a documentation. To teach with authority, but it is also meant to be a doctrine. And so therefore I came up with the idea to warn people about documentaries, because you don't know who has produced that, for what purpose, with what intention, and is it actually true? But actually it points you to a certain direction that the director, author, narrator, or anybody else who is then in relation to that document, to that movie, wants to point you to. And we are not doing documentaries here. We are doing a study about sessions, about conspiracies in the light of the Bible. So we have to see where actually the so-called kings of the world are serving the whore who sitteth amidst many waters. So the whore means an apostate church. So let's get closer to JFK. Doctrine, by the way, means the body of principles, dogmas in a religion or field of knowledge. So if somebody is explaining his doctrine by a documentary, actually he's educating you in a religious way. Very interesting when you just look about the simple meanings of the word documentation and doctrine. Yeah, this is an example what Google search will provide you with. These are several JFK documentaries. I killed JFK. I am JFK Jr. That won't save you in the end. That won't get you to the truth. It is just another point, worldly point of things. Yeah, but it does not reveal who's behind the scene. The smoking gun, etc. Also, this documentation, just as an example, will get you nowhere, because then it's been said that, oh yeah, the Nazis and the man of the military-industrial complex is behind, but that's not true, because it serves another purpose. When we first started off in one of the early sessions, it's just like a game of chess. The king is dead, long live the new king. And here you see the old king riding in his open limousine to the place of the assassination. So, for me, it is very important to point out that these key figures, they are serving not only the civilians, the ordinary people, the public, but these people serve the papacy. You see here a line of people gathered together who are Knights of Malta: Alan Dulles, John McClone, Peter Gracie, C.D. Loach, and of course the father of Mr. John F. Kennedy, Mr. Joseph Kennedy, once being an ambassador to Great Britain, a smuggler. Anybody who wants that a certain individual wanted to run for presidency in 1940, I think it was. But then he was handing over the task to his son, and as his oldest son has died in a Secret Service operation by explosion on a plane, then John F. Kennedy has taken it over. So all the people are serving the papacy. They're all Knights of Malta. Don't underestimate that. United States President John F. Kennedy seen at the White House in 1961 with Supreme Knights Luke E. Hart of the Knight of Columbus. Kennedy was a member of the Knight Bunker Hill Council 62 in Charleston, Mass, joining on St. Patrick's Day in 1946. Kennedy being an Irish Catholic guy, of course, St. Patrick's Day, one of the saints, or the saint of the Irish country. In 1946, that was when he was starting to apply for Senate in the United States. Then he already was a knight of the papacy. Yeah, Knight of Columbus. Not Surini Military Order of Malta, but this is an American branch. Yeah, the Knights of Columbus. We went into that in a former episode. He did say, I'm not the Catholic candidate for president. He did not say, I'm not the Knight of Columbus candidate for presidency, because nobody on that council there, on that interview, asked him about his membership on the Knights of Columbus. Very interesting. Very interesting. So also Mr. Kennedy has sworn his allegiance to the Pope, or to the papacy in general.
I've got a question for you, Michael.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question. Why would anyone know about the Knights of Columbus in Protestant circles anyway? You see, I think that we're taken by surprise by these things, Michael. I don't think that, maybe, Kennedy just being a Catholic, yeah, that's probably important to question to that degree, but does anyone really have much knowledge about the Knights of Columbus, really? I mean, they're pretty, seems to me like a harmless kind of organization until you consider what role the Counter-Reformation plays in political means. Then it becomes obvious, but before then it doesn't. So, any true form of Protestantism had been dealt with hundreds of years ago, and now we just have something that just imitates that form, and people just look past it because they don't understand it.
Yeah, sure, they don't understand it, but it is very relevant because they sworn their allegiance to another state. It is not only that they sworn the allegiance to the Pope, because the Pope is also the governor, the ruler of another state, being the Vatican, being in Europe.
Correct.
It is not that he is just a member of the Buddhist community or so. That would be his private issue. But when he's sworn allegiance to the papacy is running business in the country called the Vatican, one of the smallest, but the most important, most influential, and most wealthy countries around the, I don't say the globe, but around the world. Yeah, and that's the problem with it. Yeah, all these people are not members and of the state or just serving any people. They are just serving themselves.
Well, it's very complicated, Michael, what we're bringing to the table here, because it's not just the Vatican, it's the Catholic Church, which actually is Rome in its grand scale of things. So, yeah, things get really complicated, and there's a very large strategy that's been placed out over 2 millennia that, the Catholic Church has worked very hard to achieve, and they have almost reached they have reached their goal, haven't they? I think. And now they're trying to claim their prize, and they might have a hard time doing that. Kind of looks that way.
Yeah, I just skipped several pages on purpose, because that if we will be distracted from other things, which will happen from time to time, then we will not think about the main issue why Mr. Kennedy had to be forced out of office. Yeah, forced out of office. You see that he was assassinated during a business trip. He was on a trip in Dallas on the campaign for the United States presidency. He was not on a private trip for golfing. He was on a business trip. Therefore, it is to assume that his assassination has something to do with his office, because he was killed in office. It's the same as being a soldier killed during your duties, so during a fight. So then you are killed during you are doing your profession. And so his profession was to be the president of the United States. And I thought to myself how to approach the Kennedy thing. And I said, okay, at the moment, it's just a light thing to do. It's very easy to do, because just look upon why it happened in an open car, because the man was accessible from any side, almost any side, because there was no protection. And when I run around several explanations, if it is humorously or if it is seriously, I don't know. Yeah, sometimes people say, okay, that he was only being killed because he's wearing a corset. He's wearing a corset, therefore he could not duck, and therefore he had to die. Yeah. I said, okay, I take that on. I take that on. You see that you have to rely on several things. John F. Kennedy was not a very healthy president. You see him here being helped with a forklifter out of United States plane. I don't think that is one of the usual pictures you come across when you type in John F. Kennedy. But that does not necessarily mean that he was a handicapped guy and could not take his profession seriously, because at the same event, on his visit in Canada on the 16th of May, yeah, he did do other things. And if documentaries, beware of documentaries, tell you, okay, he was so weak that the doctors have presumed he won't get any older than at the age of 50, I present you this picture of planting a tree ceremony in Ottawa on the very same day, May the 16th, 1961. Does that seems like the man could not move? This president who had been pulled out of the plane by a forklifter now can dig sand on the shovel with a shovel by himself. Yeah, so don't get me the fact that he was too weak to be president, or he would not become older than 50. That's totally, absolutely BS. Yeah, please, if you do research, you have to do it correctly. Yeah, so how far he's bending forward, you see, it does not seem as if he's very, very much injured or so. There must be other issues, but yeah, maybe it was under the influence of a magic drug. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there are many other people who are being confined in a wheelchair, who has also, this was one very prominent German minister of finance. Yeah, so that does not exclude you from any office. What is very interesting is what happened before the Kennedy assassination took place. For example, Kennedy mentioned quite frequently a certain Dag Hammarskjöld, and I said once ago. So once again, Mr. Dag Hammarskjöld were also very interesting. He was befriended with Mr. Kennedy, and there are many accusations that he was killed on purpose. He had a crash in 1961 with a plane. He was a United Nations Secretary General called Dag Hammarskjöld. He was shot down over northern Rhodesia 50 years ago, so in 1961, of course, and the murder was covered up by British colonial authorities. They ignored or downplayed the witness testimony of villagers near the crash site, which suggested foul play. Very interesting. Yeah, the United Nations Secretary General. That is not just the average guy. That is a high office.
That's right. This reminds me of the current Secretary General. Was it? Forget his name. No.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I think it's like Moon, something, Ben K. Moon or something. I have to look it up. But yeah, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, you see, there are many, many, many things happening, especially to people who try to have a modest policy and who are against war and everything else. Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting, and it's also very interesting when eyewitnesses says the plane circled twice. The third time, fire came from somewhere above the plane. It glows so bright. It could have been the plane exploding because the fire was coming onto it. Huh? So there was, I don't know, a missile or something else which happened to, or which causes the plane to set on fire. The witness accounts of another plane are consistent with other insiders' account of Hammarskjöld's death. Remember, that guy was in the same period responsible for the United Nations policy when Mr. Kennedy was in office. There is no doubt that at the time of his death, Hammarskjöld, who had already alienated the Soviets, French, and Belgians, had also angered the Americans and the British with the decision to launch Operation Morthor against the rebel leaders and mercenaries in Katanga. So you see, at the end of his investigation, a certain Mr. Björkthal is still not sure who killed Hammarskjöld, but he's fairly certain why he was killed, which is also very most important question. Quote, "It's clear there were a lot of circumstances pointing to possible involvements by Western powers." The motive was there, the threat to Western interests in Congo's huge mineral deposits at this time, and this was the time of Black African liberation, and you had whites who were desperate to clinch on. Dag Hammarskjöld was trying to stick to the United Nations Charter and the rules of international law. I have the impression from his telegrams and his private letters that he was disgusted by behaviors of the big powers. Behaviors of the big powers. Very interesting mentioning of the people behind the scene. Disgusted by the behavior of big powers. Who could that be? This Dag Hammarskjöld was killed in a death in September 1961 during the first reign of the presidency of Kennedy. He remains the youngest person to have held the post, having been only 47 years old when he was appointed. Remember, Kennedy was just 46 when he was slain. The United States President John F. Kennedy named Hammarskjöld, quote, "the greatest statesman of our century," unquote. So it is very likely that he appreciated the politics of Mr. Hammarskjöld. So he would be in line with the Secretary of the United Nations. So what does that tell you when the Secretary of the United Nations is most likely been killed because he was against revolutionaries and mercenaries in an African state on the outside, and Mr. Kennedy was killed, among many reasons, one of them being the reason that he wanted to withdraw American troops out of Vietnam. Now, I think you can figure that out on yourself. But you see that Mr. Hammarskjöld won't be found in many sources relying to Mr. Kennedy. But I think that is a very interesting thing that Mr. Kennedy knew that, if there are many big powers behind it who want to avoid things even by killing a United Nations secretary. And that means that Mr. John F. Kennedy must have known since the death of Mr. Hammarskjöld that if he is against big powers, that he is also likely to be assassinated. That is my line of thinking here. But that's not all. That's not all. That's not all. I don't know from which book is United Nations Secretary General Hammarskjöld, Reflections and Personal Experiences, PDF. A page. The dangerous episode had a remarkable sequel. When the Congo adventure for me was eventually over and I found myself back in the United Nations headquarters, I was summoned to a meeting with President Kennedy. The meeting, which took place in the Oval Room of the White House in Washington on 14 March 1962, started with Kennedy explaining the background to his actions on just that particular occasion I have described. He had, for his own political survival, felt obliged to heed the deep aversion towards communism or extreme left views in general, which even long after McCarthy's hysterical heyday played an important role in domestic American politics. Yeah, in my humble opinion, that's also the reason why Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald was been chosen as the patsy, because he was coming back from a communist country, the Soviet Union, and there were many ressentiments and many hard feelings against communism in the 1960s. He had gradually come to realize how unjustified it was to oppose the United Nations Congo policy for that reason, and since it was now too late to express his apology to Doug Hammarskjöld, he wanted to do so to me. And the most powerful man in the world, that is mentioning here Kennedy, which is not the most powerful man in the world, added, quote, "I realize now that in comparison to him, I am a small man. He was the greatest statement of the century." Yeah, and it is also about the official portrait of the first Prime Minister, Mr. Lumumba, happened to be the Prime Minister of the Republic of Congo, who was in office, between June and September 1960 in Stanleyville. Oh, you know, that is the famous discoverer, Mr. Stanley here mentioned. And he was assassinated as well. So we are talking about here of a prime minister, of a leader of a country in 1960, during the time of the presidential campaign of John F. Kennedy. And he was brutally murdered. And in 2002, the Belgium formally apologized for their role in his assassination. So there are many rulers and prime ministers, leaders of a state, or kings, if you like to say so, who have been assassinated. And most likely you won't recognize their names because they are not mentioned that frequently on the mass media. Yeah. So the police commissioner, Franz Verscheur, led Lumumba and the other two to their place of execution. Lumumba, Mpolo, and Akutu were lined up against a tree and shot one at a time. The execution, etc., etc. And do you really want to know what actually happened there? I don't think that if you just have eaten something, I don't think that you really want to know what actually happened. Yeah, so I don't tell that to you, I'm showing that to you, and you decide if you want to read that or not. So many people accuse also the involvement of the American Secret Service or the Central Intelligence Agency in that thing. And now it's about the inauguration of the President Kennedy in January 1961, caused fear among Mobutu's faction, that's the prime minister here, and within the CIA that the incoming democratic administration would favor the imprisoned Prime Minister Lumumba. While awaiting his presidential inauguration, Kennedy had come to believe that Lumumba should be released from custody, so there he was still alive, though not be allowed to return to power. Lumumba was killed 3 days before Kennedy's inauguration on January the 20th, though Kennedy did not learn of the killing until the 13th of February. In 1975, the Church Committee, where we know that they said that there was an assassination taking place in the killing of the President Kennedy, went on record with the finding that the CIA chief Allen Dulles, once again, it's just not only Allen Dulles, it is the Sovereign Military Order of Malta Knight Allen Dulles, had ordered, of course he is a knight, he's in the war business, had ordered, as the president of the CIA, Lumumba's assassination as urgent and prime objective, unquote. And we know that Kennedy has eliminated Allen Dulles from his position as the chief of the CIA. So imagine, that means not only that the President Kennedy has eliminated the chief of the CIA, but that does mean that the night of Columbus, John Kennedy has eliminated the sovereign military knight of Malta, Allen Dulles. My. That's what they don't tell you on the mainstream media. Furthermore, declassified CIA cables quoted or mentioned in the Church report and in Culp mentioned 2 specific CIA plots to murder Lumumba, the poison plot and the shooting plot. The committee later found that while the CIA had conspired to kill Lumumba, it was not directly involved in the murder. Yeah, let me tell you, that is wishful thinking. And by the way, it has been said that also the former president before Kennedy, Dwight Eisenhower, has also committed the order in August 1960, so when the presidential campaign is running in full force, the order to the CIA to terminate, to kill Lumumba by poisoning in August 1960. For example, on September 26th, a CIA scientist using the name of Joseph Schneider, who was in fact the head of MK-Ultra, Sidney Gottlieb, arrived in the Congolese capital Leopoldville. That's also the name of the Belgian king, and Congo once was belonging to the Belgian kingdom, and Belgium is highly intensively run by the Jesuits. For example, there was a Jesuit priest of the name of Georges Lemaitre who came up with the theory of the Big Bang. So once again, on September 26, the CIA scientist using the name Joseph Schneider, who was in fact the head of MK-Ultra, mind control, Sidney Gottlieb, arrived in the Congolese capital Leopoldville to collect deadly biological materials, example given, anthrax, tuberculosis, tularemia. And we know that some say that the origin of the so-called AIDS causes also happened to be under heavily investigation in some kind of laboratories in Congo. But we cannot go into this. There is a very interesting and excellent documentations out there, but of course not on YouTube, huh?
Of course.
Yeah. Kennedy was an ally of United Nations Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld and Prime Ministers Patrice Lumumba and Cyril Adula in Belgian Congo. Kennedy opposed the CIA and Belgian colonists in their support of Moshe Tshombe, leader of the breakaway province of Katanga, where the important minerals were located. Incredibly, Lumumba, who was in the custody of Muptuda and then Tshombe, was illegally executed in January 1961, days before Kennedy's inauguration, after Eisenhower had given the orders for his assassination. The UN Secretary General died in an extremely suspicious plane crash in September 1961, and Kennedy was assassinated under equally strange circumstances in November 1963. End of quote. And we will discover that there were no strange coincidences in November 1963, but that takes us a much more journey and research. Yeah? So people claim that that was the moment when Kennedy was getting aware of the fact that Lumumba was killed. I don't know if that is correct. And there is also some interesting Swiss historian. He won't get into the things of the church because he wants to survive his and his family, of course. But he's written a book about Imperial USA. His name, Swiss guy, is called Daniele Ganza. It's okay. Yeah, but sometimes you see they have to read between the lines that the Pope declares that the United Union is heaven sent. The European Union is a design not only of human beings but of God. Yeah, which God they are talking about, Brett?
Oh, obviously.
Obviously.
It's the adversary of Christ. Yes.
Obviously, yes, very obviously. Yeah. Yeah, so that is major deaths happening before the Kennedy assassination. It's also very interesting to know that the driver of the limousine, when we are talking about the limousine in the last episode, William Greer, who happened to be the replacement because the original Secret Service driver called Thomas B. Shipman died of an alleged heart attack in Camp David on the 14th of October. That is about 6 weeks before the assassination took place. His death brought a very, said this quote by Vince Palamara, who is one of the most interesting researchers on that regard. Of course, he's not going into the religious things, but nevertheless, a very inept William R. Greer to drive JFK to his death in Dallas. Yeah, JFK, William Greer, that's the one who does not speed up when he's supposed to speed up, but he's braking when he's supposed to speed up. Yeah, so this is a very small article I found on that topic. It's called yeah, this is happening when you try to get in line with Microsoft. Camp David man had heart attack. Secret Service agent Thomas Shipman Monday, presidential retreat near Thurmond, 51 years old, drove Secret Service cars and occasionally President Kennedy's limousine. Yeah, occasionally. This is a picture of him and, of course, President and his First Lady. A coroner's report Tuesday gave a coronary attack as the cause of his death. So he died of, okay, that's just a joke. Funeral service, etc., 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 etc. He was a native of Washington, District of Columbia, of course, and a member of the District of Columbia Police Force, then of White House Police Detail before becoming a Secret Service agent in 1954. Yep. So they had this unexperienced, so to speak, and ineffectively Mr. Greer then as a replacement of Mr. Shipman. We have to believe that yeah. Vince Palamara means that he was replaced on purpose because Shipman was stood in the way, but we cannot prove that. And there's also people who say, yeah, I'm related to Mr. Shipman and he was really a tough guy. He was really a very, very, very where is it? Yeah, a certain John Thomas, I don't know if that is really correct here. He said, my grandfather Thomas Shipman was a good and honorable man. I always thought how proud he was that he protected the President of the United States and that he would have sacrificed his life to save the President. If John Kennedy's assassination was planned by anyone within the Secret Service, I cannot imagine that he would have ignored it. I believe that he would have taken active steps to prevent it. However, I am probably not an objective commenter on this matter. Yeah, but you see that this is at least common sense. I promised you to go into another thing which relies heavily on the assassination of your beloved famous President John F. Kennedy. And it has something to do with the small country of France. You see, there are also orders, the Order of Liberty, Ordre de la Libération. Yeah, so there are many people, and the most famous guy, when we have to come across them, is a certain Charles de Gaulle, who happened to be the prime minister in France after the Second World War. And I want to show you something. Yeah, church and state not combined. Yeah, these are Orthodox leaders, and with a picture of Charles de Gaulle, with Pope Maximus Issei at Élysée Palace, so that's the same at the White House, in France, October 21st, 1965, so 2 years after the assassination of Kennedy. Yeah, but that's not the point. You see that Mr. Charles de Gaulle was, at the same time as the German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, also, of course, a Catholic. So when John F. Kennedy met in Germany, ich bin ein Berliner, he also went to France to speak to Mr. Charles de Gaulle, who is then here prominently depicted besides Mr. Pope Paul VI. And now compare, please, that picture, Brett, with the picture you have come across with John F. Kennedy on the small chair in comparison to the big, wealthy chair of the Pope. Huh? I think that Charles de Gaulle was much more likable to the Pope than John F. Kennedy, at least when I judge the size of his chair. So much so. So much so. But now it gets really interesting because almost 1 year before the assassination of President John F. Kennedy took place, I found something which is very hilarious, funny sometimes. This is called This Day in History. Citroën, so the German car manufacturer, helps President Charles de Gaulle survive an assassination attempt. Thanks to the superior performance of the presidential automobile, the sleek aerodynamic Citroën DS, known as DS, means the goddess. Yeah, you see this is of course a funny picture here of a matchbox car or what else. Yeah, but for the help to the help of his presidential limousine, he was getting away from the place of the assassination. So officially, history is that a secret army organization plotted an assassination attempt on President de Gaulle, because they say he had betrayed France by giving up Algeria and Northern Africa to Algerian nationalists. So his black Citroën presidential limousine sped in Paris, the city capital of France, at about 70 miles per hour, and 12 gunmen opened the fire on the car. A hail of 140 bullets, most of them coming from behind, killed 2 of the president's motorcycle bodyguards, shattered the car's rear window, and punctured all 4 of its tires. Though the Citroën went into a front wheel skid, de Gaulle's chauffeur was able to accelerate out of the skid and drive to safely, all thanks to the car's superior suspension system. De Gaulle and his wife kept their heads down and came out unharmed. And now, please, Brett, compare that to the assassination which took place in Dallas with just 3 shots.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Of course, that can only mean that French cars are superior to American cars, huh?
Right.
Yeah, you see that 140 bullets, or none struck the president because he kept his head down. Of course, he was not wearing a corset, usual people would say. You see, sometimes it gets really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but 140 bullets and the president was not hit. If there is something fishy about it, I'd say you're spot on. Let's continue. This is just an example of a picture, so that you see that in the 1950s, 60s, presidents or kings or rulers or what else, they gathered and their greetings, and they were smiling at the audience in convertible cars or convertibles. But if I would take documentaries, a doctrine, seriously, they tell me that there are many, many people who wanted to get rid of Mr. General Charles de Gaulle. Yeah, here he is. It is absolutely interesting. Here he is on his way to a service at the great cathedral of Notre Dame, is French, meaning Our Lady, because of course he is going to the church in Paris. He is a Roman Catholic, and now he is on his way to a service at the great cathedral of Notre Dame. Okay? But then few die-hard Nazi snipers, you see that everything messy around the world can only be Nazi. There is no other possibility. It's always the Nazis. Snipers remain stationed in high-end buildings. And I said, oh, that sounds familiar, Brad. Wasn't there a sniper with a high-powered rifle in the Texas School Book Depository in 1963?
That's right. Correct.
My. So now, Mr. Charles de Gaulle is on his way to a service at the great cathedral of Notre Dame. Yeah? When, out of a sudden, a few die-hard Nazi snipers remain stationed high in buildings. Bullets chip the ground around Charles de Gaulle's feet as he strides confidently to the church service. Of course, unharmed, because he is a Roman Catholic. This is really General de Gaulle's assassination attempts. You can really look it up. These are some miserable subtitles because Gaulles means Charles de Gaulle, but the official automatic translator didn't got it right. But nevertheless, you see that really they claim that Mr. Charles de Gaulle, yeah, was then going unharmed to the church. Because he was confident that he would not be killed. Of course, he was protected by Our Lady. He was going to a mass. Yeah. So in this documentary, this doctrine wants to sell you that the presidential arms fight it back. Yeah, sure, with a big. You see, it's so futile. Yeah. But Charles de Gaulle went along, his head held high. Of course, he was protected by the church. Yeah, you see here Charles de Gaulle and people. Meanwhile, terrified Parisians, so the inhabitants of Paris, throw themselves to the ground. But Charles de Gaulle nevertheless held his head high and went on to the Roman Catholic Mass. That's the story they want to sell you. Now, he must be protected by Our Lady. And that's not the only accident. You see that, first of all, we had the accident or an assassination plot of 140 bullets. Then we have something with the so-called die-hard Nazi snipers. And there are several others too. When he was driving, the entire road seems to be ablaze, but he went through the flames, and there were bomb attempts. And President Charles de Gaulle and his wife Yvonne are en route from Paris to their home or what else. The presidential car now makes for the Air Force bullets, and there were bombs hidden on the road. And every time, I can tell you, every time Charles de Gaulle survived the assassination attempt. Of course, they knew who would be responsible. That was alleged certain Bastien Thierry. Yeah, but every time Charles de Gaulle, as the greatest traitor France had ever produced, because he gave the sovereignty to Algeria. Yeah, there were bombs placed on roadsides, ditches. Every attempt has failed, either to the vigilance of de Gaulle's bodyguards and the French Secret Service, or just plain and simply incompetence of the would-be assassins. Yeah. That sounds like a comedy to me. But on several websites, it actually is explained that Charles de Gaulle miraculously survived every assassination attempt there was. Where? For example, in Paris. And this is during the reign of John F. Kennedy. So when Kennedy in 1963 visited Charles de Gaulle, don't tell me that he or his Secret Service didn't knew about the massive amount of assassination attempts on the life of Charles de Gaulle, being the Prime Minister of France. So this is almost 1 year before the assassination in Dallas. And even then, you see, there were attempts to end the life of Charles de Gaulle in not a peaceful manner. Yeah? Sound of machine guns, fire in the air. You have to believe it, of course. Yeah? Spraying the president's car with machine gun bullets. But once again, Charles de Gaulle has survived, but the latest attempts on his life, yeah, bullets just one missing Charles de Gaulle's head because he ducked down. Yeah, sure, he didn't wear a corset. That's the only reason why John F. Kennedy did not survive. People tell you right in the open. So this is his automobile, this his goddess who protected him. It's like the Our Lady. It's Charles Citroën DS, which DS means in French goddess. Yeah. And also, these many attempts were being made public and being the origin of a book of a certain Frederick Forsyth. Yeah, and so he was in charge of the French Republic until 1969, so much more longer than John F. Kennedy. And he was believed to have survived more than 30 assassinations. So let's get back to the point. Why can anybody, or why can anyone survive 30 assassination attempts? Sometimes with 140 bullets with machine guns. And the other one does not survive one with just allegedly 3 bullets. Yeah, you have to explain that to me with common sense, please. And I bet you can't. I bet you can't. And these two people are related. You see, they both are heads of the state. They are both heads of the state in the 1960s, and they both met each other in 1963. Yeah, and it's officially narrative of Charles de Gaulle that he had survived many assassination attempts. And also a certain author called Frederick Forsyth has made a very interesting script about that, named The Day of the Jackal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is Frederick Forsyth. And don't think for one moment that he's not related to any kind of... Are you still with me?
Yes.
Okay. Frederick Forsyth may be known as an English novelist and journalist. He is best known for thrillers as The Days of the Jackal, The Odessa File, The Fourth Protocol, Dogs of War, The Devil's Alternative, The Veteran, Avenger, The Cobra, and The Kill Last. He has sold more than 70 million books in more than 30 languages. Oh, that's the official story.
Oh, CBE. What's that, Michael?
Yeah. He's a commander of the British Empire. You see.
There we go.
You know who's the commander of the British Empire as well? That's 007.
Yeah, that's right.
Fictitious character of James Bond. Uh-huh. Yeah. Before becoming a journalist, Forsyth completed his national service in the Royal Air Force as a pilot, for which he flew the de Havilland Vampire. He joined Reuters, so a news agency, in 1961, and the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, in 1965, for which he served as an assistant diplomatic correspondent. Forsyth reported on his early activities as a journalist. His early career was spent covering French affairs and the attempted assassination of Charles de Gaulle. Interesting, huh? But you have to dig a little bit deeper. In August 2015, Forsyth revealed that in Biafra he was an informant for the MI6, for the Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, the Foreign Intelligence Service of the United Kingdom. A relationship that continued for 20 years. According to Forsyth, he was not paid. So he was not only a certain writer, journalist, or a correspondent for one of the biggest, most influential news agencies, but he was for 20 years an informant for the Foreign Intelligence Service of Great Britain. And now you can think for yourself why he received the grade of a commander of the British Empire. I don't think that he got that for his service as being a journalist, huh? Because the rank of CBE is the rank of James Bond.
Yes.
Yeah, and in German also it is much more elaborate on that. It's claimed as a journalist and later as an author. He has been given more orders for more than 20 years from MI6. He was busy in Africa and in the German Democratic Republic, so East German at the time. East Germany. Yeah, and that's the same as 007. Yeah, it's CBE. CBE is Commander of the British Empire. CBE. That's the same title as the fictitious character 007, No Time to Die. And that's the name of the villain in No Time to Die. The latest or second to last, I don't remember, James Bond. Lucifer. You cannot make it up, but you see
pretty clever, huh?
Pretty clever, yeah. Yeah, and you see that the Spectre organization, where the arch villain of James Bond, Blofeld or who else is related to, has a symbol of the octopus. Nothing is beyond our reach. Yeah, so the octopus. Another name for the octopus could be the internet, but that's just my explanation. Yeah, because in some ancient cultures, these 8-legged monsters, which of course it's the same like a spider. My sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Of course.
Sometimes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's always. Oh, that's right.
Well, because you got a web. You got the spider on the web. Yeah, right.
Yeah, octopus also had 8 arms or legs like a spider. Yeah, and that is the significance of Spectre. That's the organization of the villain of James Bond, Spectre. Yeah, so octopusy, like an octopus. Octopussy is also the name of a title of a James Bond movie. And there's Miley Cyrus and everybody else. Yeah, that's the symptom of spectra. It's very interesting that also a general author or journalist could be a member of a secret service. So, and this is a line of vehicles, a parade for the General Charles de Gaulle. He does not had any, it was not like John F. Kennedy who just had his one Lincoln convertible. No, they had several. They had several of them. Yeah. So, but if something is damaged, then you can switch to the next one. Yeah. And you see, Mr. Kennedy was in France during the time when all the assassinations were known, who were taking place to Charles de Gaulle. Yeah? So he could also have asked Charles de Gaulle, that's a funny comment now from me, please, can I have some Citroën vehicle? But he just wanted to be driven in a Lincoln Continental, it seems. So you see that these are not bulletproof, but he sustained and he survived 30 attempts on his life. And you have to believe, because the Secret Service would never lie to you, would they? You believe that these are actual pictures of an assassination attempt on Charles de Gaulle. You have to believe it. You see, everything can be set up. They're speaking about 30 attempts on his life. 30. That's a big number. It's not 3, it's 30. Yeah? And you see, there was also a character, a villain character, a very famous villain character with a mask called Fantomas, so like fantasy. Yeah, and his DS, his goddess, it's the same automobile as Charles de Gaulle, but the white one, was equipped with rockets and could fly. Of course, goddesses can fly, can they, Brett? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
this is 1 year, 1964. 1964, very famous phantom. Fantomas is coming from phantom, and or Phantoma means an apparition.
Yeah. Wow, like Fatima.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it makes sense, when you just compare that with the assassination attempt, the official assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, who had secretly conspired with the Pope. He survived the assassination attempt. Wasn't that something similar to Pope, who also survived an assassination attempt? It's strange that all these people survived these assassination attempts, but Kennedy did not, Lumumba did not, and Hammarskjöld did not. Very interesting. There's an interesting page I came across. It's called Bizarre Things That Never Made Sense About JFK's Assassination. Quote, messing with the Secret Service is like inviting a gang of highly trained ninjas to go to town on your pathetic attempts at assassination. Just watch the video of Ronald Reagan getting shot. The first shot goes off, a split second passes, and then the president has been whisked away while John Hinckley Jr. has vanished beneath a sea of rolling bodies and fist-based justice. Yeah, so there was one who took the shot. Now compare the Kennedy assassination. The first bullet, this is the official explanation due to the Warren Commission, hits JFK in the throat, and the Secret Service does nothing. The second bullet is the headshot. The second bullet is the headshot that killed Kennedy. That is official doctrine. 5 seconds passed between the two shots. A high-speed Reagan-style response could have saved the president. Instead, as Vanity Fair details, the members of the elite unit sat on their backsides. Driver William Greer, you know, the replacement to Mr. Shipman 6 weeks ago, didn't take evasive action. Paul Landis, following the Kennedy car, didn't jump on board and shield the president with his body. The Secret Service guy you see jumping onto the car in the assassination footage, that's Clint Hill, part of the First Lady's detail, fulfilling his duty to protect Jackie. Interviews with Secret Service personnel on the Vanity Fair article talk of a macho culture where members would refuse food and sleep and spend every night getting crazy drunk. While a no-sleep hangover would explain the inaction, it doesn't explain other weird screw-ups like why the running boards on JFK cars were retracted, meaning there was no one to protect the president if something happened. Spoiler, something happened. And they will tell you in the mass media, oh yeah, but the precaution measures have much, much improved over the time due to the assassination of JFK. Yeah? But that does not explain why, for example, the running boards on JFK's car were retracted at that very day. So these are one of the bizarre things that never make sense about assassination. And that also is untrue. Because these are bizarre things that make absolutely sense about JFK's assassination. Because it was supposed to happen. That's the point. And
yeah,
you can.
That's true, Michael.
Yeah, and you can also discuss why Charles de Gaulle made it. Yeah, there are certain explanations. Well, there are only two possibilities why Charles de Gaulle survived. First of all, except luck, of course. First of all, many of these attempts were just publicity stunts to establish his position as leader of France as being invincible, something like that. And the second one is that there were not so many assassination attempts, but yeah, his Secret Service actually worked and he should be protected. So that the opponents and the assassinations were not that strong as in the case of Kennedy, where everything went into mess, or went to be a mess, actually. And these are the things. You see that when he is going into a Roman Catholic mess, being unharmed, although bullets allegedly struck the pavement and the inhabitants of Paris going down in panic. You see, that is also promotion and propaganda, not only for Charles de Gaulle, but also for the Roman Catholic Church. And him being a general, being highly sought out, and I think we have gotten into that he was also Jesuitically trained from the heritage of his father's side. You see that everything which is related to that, these people actually miraculously survive. So don't get me the fact that really this is a very interesting thing that there were 30 assassinations attempts on Charles de Gaulle and they failed all, but there was just one assassination attempt on Kennedy and that succeeded with only 3 shots and including a single bullet, magic bullet. Wow, never happened before, never happened since, but of course only these things only happen on November the 22nd. If you are just going into the subject, you won't believe what is the reason for all the things. It has another religious meaning. It has nothing to do with the things that the mainstream media is pointing out on you. Once again, beware of documentaries. They keep you busy with uninteresting facts. You see, they claim really that Mr. Kennedy has been killed from that Texas school depository as the powerful man in the world, which he wasn't. If he would be the powerful man in the world, he would have been the powerful protection, wouldn't he? The most powerful man in the world. All of these documentaries, it does not matter when they were set up, how they were made. If they don't rely on a religious subject, they're absolutely futile. Yeah? This Oswald character was not a lonely madman, because he was married and officially he was the marriage was being split up, but he had recently he had been seen the birth of a daughter, which was about the time of the assassination, I think 5 weeks old. So don't tell anybody that he was a lonely madman. Yeah, this is just television. This is just propaganda. This is just propaganda. Yeah. I highly doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald shot anyone. And I highly regret that the State of the United or the United States government officially never excused themselves for falsely accusing Mr. Oswald of this killing. Because everything which is about here in any discussion, in any documentary, is not absolutely correct. Nobody can know what's absolutely correct because we are not God. God knows everybody and knows everything. But there are so many things wrong in any discussion because they don't get the meaning of the assassination and they don't get the meaning why Mr. Kennedy was killed and not who did it. Everybody is focusing on the thing that who did it and not why. Yeah, and with the why, there are also several explanations giving. It was the trouble with the Fed. He wanted to have his own currency. Then it was the Israeli atomic thing. Then it was the Vietnam War. Then it was this. Then it was that. And you won't get any truth out of it because there are other reasons, and we have covered some of them already. Yeah, so don't fall into the trap of people explaining to you with the interesting graphics, with the sophisticated music, with the sweet narrator's voice, with professionally produced documentaries. This is all absolutely BS. Yeah? Somebody who really wants to tell you that there were more snipers than public audience on that day. It's all deception. I tried to search for this producer of that documentary, and it turns out that he only did this one documentary. And you have to tell yourself that who financed it? Why did he wrote a book on that? Yeah? Nobody talks about the background of the guys who are coming up with documentaries. You know of Brett and me that we have done many Bible sessions. We have done Science is the New Religion. We have done St. Peter versus Simon Magus. We have done Simon Peter versus Simon Magus. We have so many things in common, and we are doing that on a Sabbath. Yeah, we are not doing it for any commercial television series. We are not doing it for only the one. We are doing it only for the one purpose, to hand over valuable information, that you really see that your state is being controlled by the church. And we will prove that. We will try to prove that by using common sense and many other things and dates, that absolutely there is a combination between church and state in the assassination plot of John F. Kennedy. This is very interesting. It had nothing to do with Skull and Bones, what this everything's a rich man's trick trying to point at you. Nothing to do. Yeah, 3:2 by the example is related to the Bible, Genesis 3:2, but it has nothing to do with the things that is mentioning in that video here. Yeah? Especially when they are taking pictures of movies. Yeah. How reliable is that? This is just a picture of a movie. Yeah. But not these movie producers are behind the assassination attempt. And you see, that is just to distract the general audience. It's just a distraction. No, it has no Nazi ties in that. You see, the Nazis were just limited to 1933 to 1945. But there were evil people after 1945, and there were evil people before 1933. And that's the point you have to get aware of. And there are certain high-ranking members of secret societies. But secret societies are as old as the world is. Mm-hmm. Always people who conspired. Yeah. So don't fall into the trap of all these documentaries. Given their doctrine that the family Bush is behind it, and there's all about a big play of money, and it's high-ranking government Nazis or what else. You see, you're coming from one thing to the next, and the question why does not occur. It is just the who. Yeah, unreported by the mainstream media. Yeah, sometimes it is unreported by the mainstream media, but don't take it for granted that documentary on YouTube, BitChute, or where else, when it is not coming from a mainstream source, must necessarily be the truth. That's not the case. It's not the case. It is not the case. Let me show you. Yeah. For example, when somebody, a witness, a so-called witness, tells you, oh, there is somebody who had a rifle. It looked like a high-powered rifle because it had a scope which looked in relation to the size of the rifle to be a big scope. It does not necessarily mean that it was a high-powered rifle just because it had a scope. The scope of the size of the scope has nothing to do with the power of the rifle. And it does not mean that somebody fired. It just means that somebody allegedly saw somebody with a gun. It does not necessarily mean that this gun was fired. And it does not necessarily mean that it was a high-powered gun just because of the size of a scope. And that does not mean that anybody who has a gun with a big scope in his hand is necessarily a murderer. Although, and I hope you get the joke, you can kill people also spiritually. And you can distract the people by putting false hints, yeah, and so that people are going into the absolute false direction. And that's what many documentaries do. Yeah. Some of them don't. Some of them actually see the resemblance of the Jesuits to the CIA, or the Surinamites of Malta to the CIA, or from the Mossad. Oh. Yeah. So once again, these people, they just change their clothes, but their mindset is just an egoistical, satanic way to kill many people and to get high rewards for that. Yeah, you see what kind of badge he's wearing here? Then we know then the CIA was involved in the assassination plot of John F. Kennedy. We have to be aware of the quote of the former CIA director called William Casey, who said, "We know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false," unquote. That he said, but not officially. He said that allegedly at an early February 1908 meeting of newly elected President Reagan. Yes, that was the one who allegedly conspired clandestine with the Pope. Yeah. And you won't find any primary source, but you can also see the symbolism when Kennedy is talking to the Pope and when Charles de Gaulle is talking to the Pope. And you know what the Pope wants to express to Kennedy, that he is the supreme and that Kennedy has to obey. That's very simple. It's extremely simple. So we will not go into this documentary because everything is here for people who do not believe in Bible and in Bible prophecy, but we will go into the real events. And before we can do that into the real events and not in this BS, everybody here, we have to go to the people who are behind the scenes. And my suggestion also is that if the CIA is involved in that plot, also the counterintelligence is involved in the plot. So they are setting up certain so-called conspiracies, and they control also the other side, meaning that we have evolved around 40 years. No, we have evolved around 50 years since the killing of the President Kennedy. So if once the Warren Commission officially told the people it was so and so, it was just a low nut assassin Oswald, then they can do also a script over the time. So they can come up with things and hand over things out, so-called generously, to the average public, so that new books will be printed, new researchers will come up, new television spots will be made, etc., etc. New theories coming up. First of all, you come with the official explanation with the Oswald Lownut spoof. Then, a few years later, then you allow a certain Mr. escaped the name, Jim Garrison, to come up with his trial. Then you come up with the next explanation of the grassy knoll. Then you come up with the next explanation that it was just an accident from somebody from behind. Then you come up with the next thing in a few years. Then you come up with the next explanation. Then you will then publish new so-called restricted files and open a new investigation. And you see that where we have come from in the last almost 60 years. Nobody talks about the religious ties of the assassination plot on John F. Kennedy. Then it was Trump who said that, yeah, we will open the case, we will open documents, and then we couldn't do it because of, don't know, national security, etc., etc. And so I think that everything is controlled. The assassination of John F. Kennedy is a conspiracy after a conspiracy after a conspiracy. So even the uncovering of the conspiracy is being covered by the Secret Service or the counterintelligence. And one guy who would be responsible for that would be a certain called James Jesus Angleton. So these people, they know how to distract the people with information spread so that the majority of so-called researchers will then grasp as per it, like a dog after meat, and say, oh yeah, I got a new source, I got a new tip, and oh yeah, we have to cover that, we have to measure distance, we have to, etc., etc. And this is just also a conspiracy, and this is also distraction. We will come from a very different angle, but first, before we can go into that day of the assassination attempt, we will go into an individual who was profiting highly from the assassination, which of course will Lyndon B. Johnson. Yeah. So Lyndon B. Johnson was part of a secret meeting, according to his mistress, Madeleine Brown. And he was at a meeting with the famous oil baron or oil producer, Clint Murchison. And of course, this documentary, Everything's a Witch Hunt's Mick, is correctly saying that there was a meeting, but it was not necessarily a group of his Nazi friends, but also this documentary is falsely stating, but there were anti-Kennedy people. And so these anti-Kennedy people consist also, for example, Alan Dulles, so to speak, so the former CIA chef. So there was a secret meeting taking place with people from the secret society or secret service even. And the quote of Madeleine Brown, who has an illegitimate child of Mr. LBJ, says, quote, Lyndon Johnson said, after tomorrow, those SOBs will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise. Speaking of the Kennedys. SOBs will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise. That she said, and I will show you the very quote of her book. So that is really official so-called fact that Mr. Kennedy says that there will something happening tomorrow, so on the 22nd, that then he will get rid of the problem of the accusations of Kennedy. And what's it all about? Did LBJ kill JFK? No, he can't, because he has a very good alibi, because he was in 2 cars behind the president at the time of the event. Yeah. But he did not kill JFK. But he was, of course, been prominently profiting from the death of Kennedy. Yeah. So the mistress of Johnson, called Madeleine Duncan Brown, who bore him a legitimate child, said that after tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. Yeah, that's it. And in the next episode, we will talk about extensively, we will talk about Lyndon Baines Johnson. It's so interesting that I don't want you to miss that episode and these episodes that we are doing about Lyndon Baines Johnson, because you will see all his or many ties, not all of course, but many ties to the Roman Catholic Church, and also in comparison his politics against the politics of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And then I think it will shine a bright light on our hypothesis that actually state and church is combined and not separated. And of course, when you know that your so-called Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson so-called was knighted into the Knights of Malta, everything is starting to make much more sense, I hope. I'm sorry that we did not incorporate any Bible studies and any Bible quotes in this field, but we will do in later sessions. And I would like to thank you for your time and bearing with me with my school English. And I would like to thank you for your time. Please read your Bible. Maranatha until the next time. And like to hand it over to my beloved brother Brett.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, it's very interesting you bring this up because this is a concern I've had for quite a while now after coming to the knowledge of this hidden truth behind all of this, political theater, right? So, our elders in the United States here have been, they've been dealing with these problems for generations, and I think they have acquired a very strong, what can we say, very strong intellect where they'll listen to your side of the story and then they will reject it because, well, I've lived through this for all of my life since World War II, all of these things happening. And yeah, there are strange things happening. Well, my concern here, Brett, my concern is our elders have been taken captive by these methods of teaching. And we've been stuck in this kind of nightmare for our whole lives, and a lot of us of a little bit younger generation. They call us Generation X, and we can talk about that some other time. But I tend to think that Generation X, actually, whoever termed that, whether they were thinking about it or not, what it really represents is the target generation. So, if you can succeed with convincing your target generation that all these things are irrelevant and of no value, then you've succeeded in doing what you wish to do to this population. And that's essentially the way I see it, is that we're looking at the aftermath of a really tragic death of the truth of the gospel. Let's put it that way. The real truth behind the lie. And our elders are going to be flabbergasted when they come to the knowledge of this truth that Michael is bringing forward, and that we're in big trouble. We're in really big trouble. It's time to fess up and to start really putting the pieces back together. And I think that other researchers that I've known, such as Tom Fress, he's explained it very specifically in the Bible story known as the help me out here now. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And be really interesting if everyone knew Tom's explanation of that, because it makes a lot of sense in that, this wineskin that we've been given, we cannot put new wine in the wineskin. In other words, the old wine, the old doctrine that is going to be the only doctrine that you're going to stick with. And if you put new doctrine in there, it destroys your wineskin. It destroys your life. The only way that you can acquire new wine is if God grants you the grace and the mercy to acquire a new wineskin. And that's essentially the case as far as I see it. I'm in total agreement with that, is that the indoctrination is so vast that it will completely destroy you when you come to the knowledge of this truth, that we've been deceived from day one and beyond that. So, yeah, very interesting, Michael. Very interesting you bring these facts forward, because, it's about time. And, it's about time that we really consider all of the evidence and look into the questions that aren't willing, most are not willing to look at, because, that's a conspiracy theory. No, it's the truth that you ignored your whole life. That's what it is. That's what we're going to look at. And we hope to get deeper into that discussion next time. We hope to join you then. Maranatha.